The autumn wind whipped through the streets of Cedar Ridge, carrying with it the scent of dying leaves and the promise of a harsh winter ahead. Martha Collins sat on the wooden steps of the general store, her fingers tracing the worn patterns of her grandmother's shawl as she listened to the familiar sounds of the town that had never truly seen her. At 24, Martha had been blind since birth. Her world painted not in colors but in textures, sounds, and the subtle variations of human voices that revealed far more than most people realized. The townspeople of Cedar Ridge had long ago relegated her to the category of burden, someone to be pitied, avoided, or occasionally helped out of Christian duty, but never truly acknowledged as a whole person. "Martha, dear, you're blocking." The steps again. Came the sharp voice of Mrs. Henderson, the store owner's wife. "Customers need to get through." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson," Martha replied softly, gathering her skirts and moving to the far corner of the porch. She had learned long ago that apologies came easier than arguments, that making herself smaller was the price of being tolerated in a world that had no use for someone like her. From her new position, Martha listened to the ebb and flow of daily life in Cedar Ridge. She could identify every resident by their footsteps, Mrs. Patterson's quick, nervous taps, Old Pete's shuffling gait, the thunderous boots of Tom Bradley, the sheriff. Each person had their own rhythm, their own story told through the way they moved through the world. But today, there was a new sound, boots that moved with purpose, but without hurry, a steady, measured pace that spoke of someone comfortable in their own skin. The footsteps paused at the bottom of the store steps, and Martha heard a voice she didn't recognize. "Excuse me, miss, you seem to be waiting for someone. Is everything all right?" The voice was deep, warm, with the slight roughness that came from years of outdoor work. But more than that, it was kind, genuinely kind, not the patronizing tone she was accustomed to hearing from well-meaning strangers. "I'm fine, thank you," Martha replied, tilting her head toward the voice. "I'm just listening to the town." There was a pause, and she wondered if she had said something odd. Most people didn't understand her need to listen, to absorb the world through her ears rather than her eyes. "Listening to the town," the man repeated, and she could hear something like interest in his voice. "What does it tell you?" Martha was so surprised by the question that she forgot to give her usual apologetic response. "It tells me that Mrs. Patterson is worried about her husband's cough again. She's walking faster than usual. It tells me that the Henderson boy got into trouble because Mrs. Henderson is slamming things around in the store, and it tells me that you're not from around here, because you're the first person to ask me what I think instead of what I need." She heard a low chuckle, rich and genuine. "You're very perceptive. I'm Samuel Garrett. I have a ranch about 10 miles south of here." "Martha Collins," she replied, then added unnecessarily, "I'm blind." "I can see that," Samuel said matter-of-factly, without a trace of pity or discomfort. "But that doesn't tell me who you are." The simple statement hit Martha like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had asked who she was rather than what was wrong with her? "I'm not sure anyone's ever asked me that before," she admitted. "Well, I'm asking now." Martha found herself smiling for the first time in weeks. "I'm Martha Collins. I'm 24 years old. I live with my aunt since my parents died in the influenza outbreak 5 years ago. I can sew, cook, clean, and I know every person in this town by the sound of their voice and footsteps. I love the smell of rain on dust and the feeling of sun on my face, and I'm tired of being invisible." "You're not invisible to me," Samuel said quietly. Before Martha could respond, the harsh voice of her aunt, Prudence Collins, cut through the air. "Martha, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Martha's shoulders tensed. She could hear the disapproval in her aunt's voice, the embarrassment at finding her niece talking to a stranger in public. "Aunt Prudence, this is Mr. Garrett." He was just, "I'm sure Mr. Garrett has better things to do than chat with you, dear." Prudence interrupted, her voice saccharine with false sweetness. "Come along. We have work to do at home." Martha felt the familiar burn of humiliation, the way her aunt always managed to make her feel like a burden and an embarrassment. She started to rise from her seat, but Samuel's voice stopped her. "Actually, ma'am, I was hoping to continue our conversation. Your niece was telling me about the town, and I found her insights quite valuable." There was a strength in his voice that Martha had never heard directed on her behalf. It made something warm unfurl in her chest. "Insights." Prudence's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Mr. Garrett, I'm afraid you don't understand. Martha is, well, she's not quite right. The blindness, you see, it's affected her mind. She says odd things, imagines things that aren't there. We try to keep her occupied, but really, she's more of a charity case than anything else." Martha felt her cheeks burn with shame. She had heard variations of this speech countless times, but never in front of someone who had seemed to see her as a real person. "Mrs. Collins." Samuel's voice had turned cold. "I think you're the one who doesn't understand. Your niece has shown more intelligence and insight in 5 minutes of conversation than most people manage in an hour. If you can't see that, then perhaps the problem isn't with her vision, it's with yours." The silence that followed was deafening. Martha could practically feel her aunt's shock and outrage radiating through the air. "Well, I never," Prudence sputtered. "Martha, come with me this instant. We will not be subjected to such rudeness." Martha felt torn between the familiar safety of compliance and the thrilling possibility of standing up for herself. For once in her life, someone had defended her, had seen her worth. Could she find the courage to defend herself? "Aunt Prudence," she said quietly but firmly, "Mr. Garrett wasn't being rude. He was being kind. Perhaps you could try it sometime." The gasp that escaped her aunt's lips was audible to half the street. "Martha Collins, how dare you speak to me that way after everything I've done for you? Taking you in when no one else would have you. That's enough." Samuel's voice cut through Prudence's tirade like a blade. "Mrs. Collins, your niece is a grown woman who deserves to be treated with respect. If you can't manage that, then perhaps she'd be better off elsewhere." "Elsewhere?" Prudence's voice rose to a shriek. "Are you suggesting no respectable man would take on a blind woman? Mr. Garrett, she's damaged goods. A burden that, the only thing damaged here is your ability to see your niece's worth." Samuel interrupted. "Martha, would you like to take a walk with me? I'd like to hear more about what you've observed about this town." Martha's heart raced. She could feel the stares of the gathering crowd, hear the whispers starting to spread. This would be the talk of Cedar Ridge for weeks. But for the first time in her life, someone was offering her a choice, not telling her what she should do, but asking what she wanted to do. "I would like that very much," she said. Standing and extending her hand, Samuel took her arm gently, his touch respectful and steady. "Then let's walk." As they moved away from the store, Martha could hear her aunt's voice rising in outraged protests behind them. But for once, she didn't care. For the first time in her 24 years, someone had seen past her blindness to the person she really was. "Thank you," she whispered as they walked. "For what?" Samuel asked. "For seeing me," Martha replied. "For making me feel like I exist." "Martha," Samuel said, his voice warm with conviction, "you don't just exist, you shine. And anyone who can't see that is the one who's truly blind." As they walked through the streets of Cedar Ridge, Martha felt something she had never experienced. Before, the feeling of being seen, valued, and respected. She didn't know where this walk would lead, but for the first time in her life, she was excited to find out. The path that Samuel led Martha down wound away from the main street of Cedar Ridge, past the church and the schoolhouse, toward the quieter outskirts of town where the sounds of commerce gave way to the gentle rustle of autumn leaves and the distant lowing of cattle. "Where are we going?" Martha asked, her hand resting lightly on Samuel's arm as they walked. She could feel the strength in his forearm, the steady confidence of his gait, and it made her feel safer than she had in years. "There's a place I'd like to show you," Samuel replied. "A spot where you can hear the whole valley. I thought you might appreciate it." Martha was touched by his consideration. Most people assumed that because she couldn't see, she had no interest in places or scenery. They failed to understand that her world was just as rich and beautiful as theirs. It was simply painted in different colors. As they walked, Samuel described the landscape around them without being asked, not in the condescending way that most people did, as if she were a child who needed everything explained, but in the natural way of someone sharing something beautiful with a friend. "The cottonwoods are turning gold now," he said, "and there's a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. The mountains look like they're wearing purple velvet today, with snow caps like lace trim. You have a poet's soul, Mr. Garrett," Martha observed, smiling at his descriptions. "Samuel, please, and I think you're the poet. The way you described listening to the town back there, that was beautiful." They reached a small hill overlooking the valley, and Samuel helped Martha settle onto a fallen log that served as a natural bench. From here, she could indeed hear the whole valley spread out below them, the whisper of wind through grass, the distant sounds of cattle and horses, the faint echo of the town behind them. "It's perfect," Martha breathed, closing her eyes and letting the symphony of sounds wash over her. "Tell me about yourself, Samuel," she said after a moment. "What brought you to Cedar Ridge today?" She heard him settle beside her on the log, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I needed supplies for the ranch, but honestly, I've been coming to town more often lately, hoping to meet someone in particular," Martha asked, surprised by the stab of disappointment she felt. "Not someone specific," Samuel said quickly, "just someone real, someone who sees the world differently than the usual run of people. I've been lonely, Martha. My ranch is successful. My cattle are healthy, but I've been missing something I couldn't name. Until today." Martha's heart skipped a beat. "What happened today?" "I met a woman who listens to towns and hears stories in footsteps," Samuel said softly. "A woman who's been made to feel invisible but shines brighter than anyone I've ever met." Martha felt tears prick at her eyes. "Samuel, you don't know me. You don't know what it would mean to be involved with someone like me. I can't see your face. Can't tell if you're handsome or plain. I can't cook a meal without burning it half the time. Can't sew a straight seam without feeling my way along every inch. I'm not whole, Martha." Samuel's voice was firm, and she felt his hand gently cover hers. "Look at me. I can't look at you," she said with a bitter laugh. "That's rather the point." "Then feel," he said, and to her surprise, he took her hand and placed it against his cheek. Martha's breath caught. His skin was warm and slightly rough from sun and wind. With the faint scratch of a day's beard growth, she could feel the strong line of his jaw, the high cheekbone, the laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of a man who found joy in life despite its hardships. "Now," Samuel said, "tell me what you see." "I see a kind man," Martha whispered, her fingers tracing the planes of his face with wonder. "I see someone who works hard, but doesn't let it make him bitter. I see strength and loneliness and hope." "You see more than most people who have perfect vision," Samuel said. "Martha, you are whole. You're more whole than anyone I've ever met. The fact that you can't see with your eyes just means you see with your heart instead." Martha let her hand linger on his face for another moment before pulling it back, overwhelmed by the intimacy of the gesture and the emotions it stirred in her. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why are you being so kind to me? What do you want?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, and Martha could hear him gathering his thoughts. "5 years ago, I lost my wife in childbirth, she and the baby both, for 5 years. I've been going through the motions of living, working the ranch, coming to town for supplies, existing but not really living. I thought I was content with that half-life until I heard your voice today, my voice. The way you talked about listening to the town, about being tired of being invisible. There was so much life in your voice, so much spirit that refuses to be crushed despite everything you've endured. You woke something up in me that I thought had died with my wife." Martha felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "Samuel, I can't replace her. I can't be what she was to you. I'm not asking you to replace her," Samuel said gently. "I'm asking you to be yourself, to let me get to know the remarkable woman I met today, to give us both a chance to find out what we might become together. But the practical matters," Martha said desperately. "I can't run a household properly. I can't help with ranch work. I'd be nothing but a burden to you." Samuel's laugh was warm and genuine. "Martha, I have a housekeeper who comes in twice a week and insists on doing more than I pay her for. I have ranch hands who know the work better than I do. What I don't have is someone to talk to at the end of the day. Someone to share sunsets with, and yes, I know you can't see them, but you can feel them. Someone to laugh with, to plan with, to build a life with. You're talking about marriage," Martha said, barely breathing the words. "Eventually, if that's what we both want. But for now, I'm talking about courtship, about getting to know each other, about giving yourself a chance to be seen and valued the way you deserve to be." Martha sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was offering. A chance at love, at a real life, at being wanted rather than merely tolerated. "What would people say?" she asked finally. "About you courting a blind woman? Let them talk," Samuel said firmly. "Martha, I've spent 5 years not caring what people think, and it's made me miserable. I'd rather spend the rest of my life not caring what people think while being happy. With you." Martha turned toward him, wishing she could see his face, see the truth of his feelings written there. But she could hear it in his voice, feel it in the way he spoke her name, sense it in the careful way he touched her hand. "I don't know how to be courted," she admitted. "I don't know the rules, the expectations. No one's ever. Then we'll make our own rules," Samuel said. "We'll figure it out together. Martha, will you let me call on you? Will you give us a chance?" Martha thought of her life in her aunt's house, the endless, thankless chores, the constant reminders of her inadequacy, the crushing loneliness of being surrounded by people who saw her as nothing more than an obligation. Then she thought of Samuel's voice, warm with respect and genuine affection, and the way he had seen her worth when no one else could. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, I'll give us a chance." She heard Samuel release a breath he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said simply. As they sat together on the hillside, watching the sunset over the valley, Samuel describing the colors, while Martha felt the warmth on her face, Martha began to believe, for the first time in her life, that she might be worthy of love after all. "Samuel," she said as they prepared to head back to town, "there's something you should know about me." "What's that?" "I'm not as helpless as my aunt makes me seem. I can do more than people think. I've been afraid to try, afraid to fail and prove them right about me being useless." Samuel took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Then maybe it's time to stop being afraid. Maybe it's time to show the world and yourself what Martha Collins is really capable of." As they walked back toward town, Martha felt something she had never experienced before: hope for the future. For the first time in her 24 years, she could imagine a life where she was valued, loved, and free to be herself. The road ahead would not be easy. She knew her aunt would object, that the town would gossip, that there would be challenges she couldn't even imagine yet. But with Samuel's hand steady on her arm and his voice warm with promise, Martha finally believed that she was worth fighting for. 3 weeks had passed since Samuel first defended Martha on the steps of the general store, and the entire town of Cedar Ridge was buzzing with scandal. The idea of the successful rancher courting the blind spinster was beyond the comprehension of most residents, and opinions ranged from pity for Samuel's obvious mental breakdown to outrage at Martha's audacity. Entrapping such a good man, Martha sat in her aunt's parlor, her fingers working steadily on a piece of embroidery that she did entirely by touch, something that would have amazed the townspeople who considered her helpless. She was waiting for Samuel's daily visit, a routine that had become the brightest part of her days. "This has gone on long enough," Aunt Prudence declared, bursting into the room with the force of a small tornado. "I've just had a visit from Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Patterson, and they're beside themselves with concern." "Concern about what?" Martha asked, though she knew perfectly well what was coming. "About you making a fool of yourself, and more importantly, making a fool of that poor man." "Martha, you cannot seriously believe that Samuel Garrett has genuine feelings for you. He's obviously going through some sort of mental crisis, and you're taking advantage of his temporary madness." Martha's hands stilled on her embroidery. 3 weeks of happiness had given her strength she'd never possessed before, but her aunt's words still had the power to wound. "Have you considered," Martha said carefully, "that perhaps he sees something in me that you've never bothered to look for?" Prudence snorted. "What could he possibly see? You're blind, Martha. You can't keep house properly. You can't bear children safely. You can't even walk down the street without assistance. What man in his right mind would choose such a burden?" Before Martha could respond, the sound of approaching hoof beats announced Samuel's arrival. Martha's heart lifted at the familiar rhythm of his horse's gait, and she quickly set aside her needlework. "He's here," she said, unable to keep the joy from her voice. "Yes, he's here," Prudence said grimly. "And it's time someone talked sense into both of you." Samuel's knock came at the front door, and Martha could hear her aunt's heavy footsteps. As she went to answer it, she heard the murmur of voices in the hallway, then Samuel's footsteps approaching the parlor. "Good afternoon, Martha," he said warmly, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Good afternoon, Samuel," she replied, rising to greet him. "Mr. Garrett." Aunt Prudence interrupted before they could exchange their usual embrace. "I need to speak with you privately about Martha." Martha felt her stomach drop. She had been dreading this moment, knowing that her aunt would eventually try to interfere directly. "I'd prefer to speak in front of Martha," Samuel said calmly. "Anything concerning her should include her." "Very well," Prudence said, her voice tight with disapproval. "Mr. Garrett, I don't know what sort of game you're playing, but it needs to stop. You're giving my niece false hope, and when you come to your senses and abandon her, she'll be more broken than before. Mrs. Collins." Samuel's voice had taken on the cold edge that Martha had heard him use with her aunt before. "I can assure you that I'm not playing any sort of game." "Then you're deluded," Prudence snapped. "A man of your standing, your success, could have any woman in the territory. Why would you saddle yourself with a blind cripple who can't even stop?" Samuel's voice cut through her aunt's tirade like a whip crack. "Don't you dare speak about Martha that way. Not in my presence, not ever." "I'm speaking the truth," Prudence retorted. "She's damaged goods, Mr. Garrett. She can't see. She can barely manage the simplest household tasks, and she certainly can't give you the sons you'll need to carry on your ranch. You're throwing your life away on a woman who will never be anything but a burden." Martha felt the familiar burn of shame and humiliation, but this time it was mixed with a growing anger. She had listened to variations of this speech her entire life, but hearing it directed at Samuel, hearing her aunt try to convince the man she loved that she was worthless, ignited something fierce inside her. "That's enough," Martha said, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. "Aunt Prudence, you have spent 5 years telling me what I can't do, what I'm not good enough for, what I'll never be able to accomplish. But you know what? You're wrong. Both." Samuel and Prudence fell silent, shocked by the force in Martha's voice. "I can cook, and cook well, when someone isn't constantly telling me I'm doing it wrong," Martha continued, her confidence growing with each word. "I can keep house, I can manage finances, I can care for animals, I can do embroidery so fine that Mrs. Patterson begged me to make doilies for her parlor, though she won't admit it publicly, because it would mean acknowledging that the blind woman has more skill than she does." "Martha," Prudence began, but Martha cut her off. "I'm not finished. You say I can't bear children safely, but you have no medical knowledge to support that claim. You say I'm a burden, but I've been doing half the work in this house for 5 years while you take credit for all of it. You say no man would want me, but Samuel is standing right here, proving you wrong." Martha turned toward where she knew Samuel was standing, her face flushed with passion and determination. "And as for giving you sons to carry on your ranch, Samuel, do you need sons to be happy? No." Samuel said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I need you to be happy. There's your answer." "Aunt Prudence," Martha said, turning back toward her aunt, "Samuel doesn't love me despite my blindness. He loves me, period. Just as I love him, not because he's successful or handsome or any of the things you think matter, but because he has a kind heart and he sees my worth when others refuse to." The silence that followed was deafening. Martha could hear her aunt's harsh breathing, could sense Samuel's presence like a warm beacon beside her. "This is madness," Prudence said finally, her voice shaking with rage. "Complete madness. You'll ruin yourself, Martha, and when he abandons you because he will, don't come crying to me." "I won't need to," Martha replied calmly, "because he won't abandon me. Will you, Samuel?" "Never," Samuel said firmly. "In fact, that's why I came here today." Martha felt her heart skip a beat. There was something different in his voice, something formal and determined that made her breath catch. "Martha," Samuel said, and she heard him move closer to her. "I had planned to do this properly, to court you for months and ask your aunt's permission. But after what I've just heard, I realize that waiting is pointless. Samuel, Martha whispered. Hardly daring to hope. Martha Collins, Samuel said. And she gasped as she realized he was kneeling in front of her. You are the strongest, most beautiful, most remarkable woman I've ever known. You see the world with your heart, and you've taught me to do the same. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the light of my life? Martha felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she reached out to touch his face, confirming that he was indeed kneeling before her. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes, Samuel. Yes, she heard Aunt Prudence gasp, heard a chair scrape as her aunt presumably sat down hard in shock, but Martha didn't care about her aunt's reaction. All that mattered was Samuel's arms coming around her as he stood and lifted her off her feet, spinning her round in a circle of pure joy. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I love your courage, your spirit, your beautiful heart. I love the way you listen to the world and hear music where others hear only noise. I love you too, Martha replied, clinging to him as if he might disappear. I love your kindness, your strength, the way you make me feel like I can do anything. You can do anything, Samuel said firmly. We can do anything together. When he finally set her down, Martha turned toward where she knew her aunt was sitting. Aunt Prudence, I want to thank you. Thank me. Prudence's voice was faint with shock. Yes, for 5 years you told me I was worthless, that no one would ever want me, that I was nothing but a burden. You made me believe I was less than nothing. But because of that, when Samuel came along and saw my worth, I knew it was real. If I had grown up loved and confident, I might have wondered if he was just being kind. But because you convinced me I was unlovable, I know that when he loves me, it's genuine. Martha paused, then added softly, so thank you for making Samuel's love mean even more to me than it otherwise would have. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Aunt Prudence beginning to cry. Whether from rage, shock, or some other emotion, Martha couldn't tell and didn't care. When? Samuel asked, his arm still around Martha's waist. When what? When will you marry me? Tomorrow. Next week. I don't want to wait another day to start our life together. Martha laughed, giddy with happiness. Next week, then. But Samuel, are you sure? Once we're married, you'll have to deal with me every day, my stubborn moments, my fears, my bad cooking when I'm distracted. Martha, Samuel said, his voice warm with love and amusement. I've been dealing with cattle for 10 years. Trust me, you'll be the easy part. As they stood together in her aunt's parlor, making plans for their wedding and their life together, Martha felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. She had spent her entire life being told she was broken, but Samuel had shown her the truth. She wasn't broken at all. She was exactly who she was meant to be, and that was enough. More than enough, it was everything. One more thing, Samuel said as they prepared to leave for a walk to discuss wedding plans. What's that? I want you to know that you'll never be invisible again. Not to me. Not to anyone who matters. You're going to shine so bright that the whole world will see you. Martha smiled, her face radiant with joy and love. I already do shine, she said confidently. You taught me that. You taught me to see myself the way you see me. And how do I see you? Samuel asked softly. Like I'm beautiful, Martha replied. Like I'm strong. Like I'm worth loving. Exactly, Samuel said, kissing her forehead gently. Exactly like that. As they walked out into the afternoon sunshine, Martha felt the warmth on her face and knew that she was walking into a future brighter than any she had ever dared to imagine. The blind woman who had been ignored and dismissed had found a man who saw her soul, and in seeing her, had taught her to see herself for the first time in her 24 years. Martha Collins knew exactly who she was, a woman worthy of love, capable of anything, and finally, gloriously visible. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of love. Seeing beyond the surface. Hit that notification bell to never miss our heartwarming tales of true connection.